What a race, ladies and gents. Pierre Gasly for AlphaTauri has taken his debut Grand Prix victory in Formula One after a stunning, completely bonkers, completely unknown of a race at Monza today. Hello, welcome to the Winging It F1 podcast, where we're going to attempt to dissect and take apart that absolutely ridiculous event that just happened this afternoon on Sunday in Italy. But we probably will be a little bit sidetracked by the whole what the hell of it all. I'm Freddie Coates, and I am here with Adam Dickinson and Nigel Chu. How are you guys doing? You suitably speechless? Hopefully not. We've got to record a podcast.
Adam.
Well, I'm a bit, I don't know. It's kind of, so I was reporting on it for lastlap.co.uk. Check out my report on there.
Don't forget the hyphen.
But yeah, it was just a crazy race, even from the start as well. It wasn't like it kind of, there was just excitement in the middle. It was like exciting all the way through. It was so good. And I kind of feel a bit fatigued now, having to make sense of it, first of my report and now this. But yeah, what a brilliant race. It's kind of best race in a long time, one of the all-time classics that you kind of, put it with the Johnny Herbert win, or, better than Vettel's win for Toro Rosso, I think. And yeah, it's just, what a race.
Yeah, incredible result. Anyone who thought, that top three, Stroll, Sainz and Gasly, they need to go buy a lottery ticket tonight if you thought that was going to happen. But it always seems to happen in F1, doesn't it? We get a few boring races, everyone saying, oh, it's the worst season ever or whatever. But then you get a race like this. I thought about Austria last year when Mercedes, I think, got 1-2 in the first 8 races, but then, Verstappen won with a few laps to go in a classic race there. Spain 2016 as well. That came from nowhere after a slightly dull start to the season. A couple of Hungary races over the year as well. So, yeah, it was just an incredible result for AlphaTauri and for F1. Just a great day.
It's like we said last time, or in the preview for this Grand Prix, that if you take out Verstappen, Bottas, Hamilton, you'd have a great race, and that's actually what happened, which is, it's just incredible.
Yeah, and so the process for that was Bottas took himself out of contention by not being able to pass people after a bad start, which we can get into
in the best
later
car.
about is that because of the Mercedes in traffic, or is that because of Bottas in traffic? And I think based on Lewis Hamilton in traffic, we can assume it's Bottas in traffic. And then Lewis Hamilton, after comfortably building up his gap gently, saving the engine. We even have radio messages about how to short shift in terms of whether it would wear the engine or whether it would save the tyres. The tyres were not of concern. The engine wear was of concern. So saying, how about we don't short shift, which is by about lap 10, and you're thinking about that, it's in the bag, surely. And then a slight unfortunate retirement for Kevin Magnussen. He wasn't having the best of races. He had pitted after lap 1 anyway. And he tried to bring it out of the way. He put it with a Marshall post, but got in the way of the pit lane. So,
Driver of the day,
Kevin Magnussen.
Yeah, 100%. No competition.
He tried to park it up well, and all hell broke loose. Lewis Hamilton there was a safety car called when they realised they couldn't move the car, which is what we're going to come back to, presumably with Pierre. And Mercedes and Hamilton did the logical option, which was to pit to get a free pit stop. But for the first time I can remember this happening, the pit lane was closed. Lewis Hamilton didn't see the LED boards with a big red cross on, which is still pretty hard to see from the onboard camera, really. It just looked like a safety car sign, I thought, which is fair. But road regulation came to the pit lane, as did Antonio Giovinazzi. Both were given 10-second stop-go penalties. And it spelt dismay for a Mercedes victory. What do you guys think about the penalties then? Do you think Hamilton could have avoided it? Do you think it's weird? Do you think it's a bit strange to shut the pit lane based on where Magnussen was? Nigel, you go.
Team's fault, 100%. McLaren, Red Bull, Racing Point, Renault, everyone else apart from Giovinazzi with Alpha, they got it right, and Hamilton had more than enough time to, for the team to make a decision. So I blame the team more than Hamilton, because I agree. I think the sign was difficult to see. 10 seconds stop and go. I think that's fair as well, because back in the days when they used to close the pit lane anyway, in 2007, 8, about that era, Massa got disqualified in Canada, I think, one year, and someone else did as well for going into the pits under the safety car when the pit lane was closed. So, yeah, I think the penalty was definitely fair. It just caught them out, unfortunately, and it was one of those things. I just, fair penalty. That's my answer.
Adam, anything to add?
Not really. I mean, it's kind of open and shut case, in terms of did he break the rule? It's one that you can objectively say the pit lane was closed at the point he entered it. And I think it's tough. I mean, for him, how, like you said, we can't think of the last time that he, that there's been the pit lane closed. So it won't, for him, it just won't have been in his mind, I imagine.
No.
And I can kind of, I guess with Mercedes, it's a bit tough being the first, because you kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, maybe. I don't know exactly when the lane closed compared to when they radioed him and when Hamilton went in. But it's just kind of, it's one of those where I don't know, it's what you do, probably 10 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100. It's what you do in that situation at that stage of the race. And I don't know kind of whether it was just didn't get communicated to the strategist or whatever, or to Bono, but yeah, it's their fault. I don't know how harshly I come down on them for it, but it's their fault. And
it cost them the win, didn't it? So it was a small error with a massive consequence, really. But yeah, it was just one of those things.
About the time,
if they do pit, I was just going to say, if they don't pit there and everyone else pits,
everyone else couldn't pit though, could they?
Oh yeah, but I mean,
in an ordinary circumstance.
In an ordinary circumstance, if they don't pit, everyone else does, and they can lose the race from there. Yeah. So that's kind of what I mean. But yeah, it's just communication.
Kind of following on from that, at the kind of time where the safety car was called, though I didn't see any notification that said the pit lane was closed. I might have missed it, but we definitely saw one that said pit lane open later on. But you would think that's a question about direction from the FIA and race control to the teams. Might be something a little bit that needs to be looked at, something there, because they definitely had it on the LED boards. There was no, if it was on the LED boards before Hamilton went into the Parabolica, which it was, surely it should be in Bono's ear from James Vowles going, can't come into the pits, can't come into the pits, can't come into the pits. I know it's the norm, but he can't come in. So there should be a flash up on their pit wall, surely, which there presumably wasn't, unless they weren't looking. But Mercedes are not a team that's off the ball.
Yeah, although, go on, Adam.
I was just going to say, I've just watched the incident now from Hamilton's on board, and there's like a big LED screen over the top of the pit lane entry that's kind of advertising and stuff normally, and then like at the end of the race it will say race winner and whatever, but that actually said that it's got like the box graphic coming up on there as he's coming in. So yeah, that's, I mean, obviously it's not, it will just be run whenever a car's coming in from them. But yeah, it's that's not great. So, but yeah, sorry Nigel, what were you going to say?
What was I going to say? Yeah, it was a bit like Monaco 2015, wasn't it, when Hamilton pitted when he shouldn't have, when he lost, when Mercedes made the mistake. So it was just another miscommunication or pit error. But, Sainz the McLaren guys didn't follow him in, so they knew what was going on. Just Mercedes got it wrong with Hamilton, and they must have realised quickly they made a mistake because obviously Bottas didn't pit as well. So, yeah.
At the time, I kind of thought it was advantage McLaren if it was an ordinary pit lane circumstance. You had two McLarens in second and third. I kind of thought, so we've seen, if you take it as a control, Bottas in traffic, he can't overtake. Even when he's getting close, he's got to pull out to cool the car. That's not Bottas, that's the car. So if that's similar perspective, presumably for Hamilton later on, if McLaren leave one car out, for instance, Norris or Sainz, based on whoever's on track, McLaren could, I thought, if Hamilton and one McLaren pit, and then it became McLaren no pit, Hamilton, McLaren, whichever order they chose to do it, 2-3, then McLaren could then sort of either back up Hamilton in traffic when they get under. It's a risky strategy. But I kind of thought it's advantage McLaren if Hamilton can't pass.
I think I would. Oh, yeah.
Maybe not quite get past, but like at least get into a fight with Hamilton for the lead. It was McLaren had nothing to lose to go for the win there. I think more, even in an ordinary circumstance.
They've got a double podium to lose.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah,
that's quite a lot.
If you haven't won in 2012.
If it was a normal race, McLaren probably would have got second and third, I reckon, or second and fourth. So, I wouldn't compromise one of the drivers to probably get 2 or 3 points just to try and help the other. I think it would be a bit silly. And we saw at Silverstone, didn't we, when there was a safety car on lap 12, 13, everyone came into the pits no matter what. So it would have been the same today if the pit lane was open, I think.
Fair. I did think they were going to do it when Sainz didn't come into the pit lane. I thought for a second, hang on a second, why are they going with my bonkers strategy?
Yeah, well, it was like, I think firstly, like, I don't think, like, I can't see how that would work. I mean, like, I see what you're saying, but I can't think of any situation where they kind of managed to get the win, even in that scenario.
See, I thought Mercedes did it in Monza a couple of years ago. They pincered Raikkonen, I think it was, and then got, I think, a 1-2.
But then look at how Hamilton's come through the field. I mean, we'll discuss that later.
Yeah, exactly. It was based on Bottas's crap traffic.
But yeah, it was kind of weird. It was like, oh, Sainz hasn't come in. That's weird. Oh, neither's Norris. Oh, I forget, was it Perez who was next or Ricciardo? And it was like, oh, wow, why is no one pitting? And then obviously it came out, and we thought it was going to be kind of all on the McLaren pit stop because they've had quite a lot of trouble with their pit stop this year. So it seemed like that would be the big pressure moment of the Grand Prix for them. And in the end, they kind of avoided it a bit. They managed to get a clean set of stops. I think, was it Ricciardo or Perez? There was someone who had a slow.
Ricciardo and Perez. They were both jumped by Bottas.
Yeah, and Mercedes had a phenomenal pit stop on Bottas.
It did, yeah.
Went a bit unnoticed, which is probably fair enough given the rest of the race.
Yeah, and so we've spoken about the circumstances that led to it, but so Pierre Gasly had already pit by that point. He had been running in the top 10. He pit sort of around the time that Magnussen stopped. He was already into the pits. It seemed a pretty scheduled pit stop.
From AlphaTauri.
It was pretty good. I mean, whether it was in anticipation or whether it was just going to their plan, came into the pits, put on hards presumably, and then just came out. And then by the time the safety car came out, he was in a good position. By the time Charles Leclerc, after the first restart on that lap, came off at the Parabolica after losing it sort of on the marbles, I think, just went straight into the wall at the Parabolica. After that red flag, and everyone else after that safety car, everyone else pit, and then he went up the order, and then there was a red flag. So then he was up the order, having already pit, but then also able to go onto fresh tyres. He was just up the order, and that worked out brilliantly for him.
Yeah, if anyone's wondering about what happened with Alonso and Piquet and the infamous, what do you call it? Intentional
Crashgate
thing. Crashgate, that's it. Yeah, that is exactly how Renault won the race that year, because they told Piquet to crash. So Alonso came in, Piquet crashed, Alonso benefits, just exactly like Gasly did today, because in those days they closed the pit lane entry, and that's what happened today. So exactly what we saw. But I'm pretty sure there was no collaboration between
Yeah.
Kevin Magnussen and Pierre
Yeah.
Gasly
Probably
today.
worth probably worth tagging
Yeah,
that on.
just but yeah,
Yeah.
what a drive from Gasly
But
to
I just
be
no,
yeah.
sorry.
to be out in front leading the race. Yes, it was difficult to overtake, but that's the first time he's been in that position in F1, and he kept a cool head. He didn't make any mistakes. Got a very good start under restart, standing start, and he just held his own. He was a bit lucky there wasn't one or two more laps, because I think Sainz might have had him or he might have collided, and everyone would have gone mad. But yeah, a fantastic drive, and so well deserved after his house got robbed earlier this year. I think a few weeks ago in August, and he's had a fantastic season, and this is just topped it off really.
Yeah.
All of AlphaTauri, just their whole kind of setup and the way they manage races, I'm always really impressed with. And you know, that's just, as you say, for Gasly, he's had kind of a very roller coaster career in F1 so far. But yeah, it's you know, to get it here, 12 years on from when Vettel got his win for Toro Rosso.
Yeah.
Here, kind of different circumstances then. But yeah, he did so well to hold on, and you know, yeah, Sainz could have got him if there'd been a few more laps, but you know, there wasn't. That's how the race worked. It's brilliant from him.
I mean, it depends when Sainz would have attacked, because he was in the 1.2, 1.6 sort of second margin for a long time. And then he just floored it with the ERS when he could at the end. I think even if there was a few more laps, arguably he might have had one or two more attempts at a move by, but he would have only floored the ERS a bit later on anyway. So I think Pierre just drove fantastically when he did. Carlos drove fantastically when he needed to as well. If you look at where Norris finished, they were on the restart. They were side by side. Sainz was able to clear Raikkonen and Giovinazzi before Giovinazzi even came in for his drive-through penalty. He stayed out to sort of back up a bit to help Raikkonen on their soft tyre gamble, which is fair enough for Alfa Romeo. Probably talk about that in a bit. Sainz was then able to start his charge on Gasly. He probably, even if he got past Raikkonen a bit early, he probably could have got up a bit earlier to Gasly and put a bit of pressure on. But Gasly just nailed that restart where his rivals, such as Stroll, who was on the front row for that restart, was unable to. He just got a lot of wheel spin, he said after the race, and his podium interview with Stroll. And Gasly was just able to control it and lead the majority of the laps of the race, frankly. 26 laps, I think, led for Gasly.
Yeah, it was about half the race, wasn't it? So yeah, it was just phenomenal, really. And I disagree. I do think if there was one or two more laps, I do think he would have been overtaken, you know, I have to say. Or like I said, they might have collided, which would have been heartbreaking.
Oh, man.
But imagine that.
Lance Stroll winning the Italian Grand Prix from Lando Norris and Valtteri Bottas, lucking into third place.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like, in general, it's a bit of a moot point, though. It's like, if the race had been 2 laps shorter, then there wouldn't have been a contest. If it had been 26 laps shorter, then Lewis would have won. It's like, you know, I think,
well,
yeah. But, you know.
I mean, he still was a 10-second stop go at 26 laps.
Yeah, but, yeah, well, whatever. But, you know, Gasly drove it pretty much to perfection, undercame a lot of pressure at the end, and did manage to hold on. And he was banging in good lap times. Like, considering how
he was coasting
based off qualifying and the FP3 mainly, AlphaTauri and kind of in general the Honda powered cars seem to be a bit a disadvantage compared to McLaren and the with that Renault engine in. You know, McLaren kind of looked maybe even the second fastest team. So to kind of, to be able to hold on that gap, then, you know, it does say a lot about him in terms of pace and temperament.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was graphics that kept coming up showing Carlos Sainz closing in on Gasly, and every lap he was fractionally getting closer and closer, just a little bit closer. And then when he did get, you know, when you got to a distance where it's like, oh, he's actually going to properly catch him with a good 5 laps to go, Gasly controlled it. He'd been controlling the gap. He then was able to keep him at arm's length all the way up until the end, where he was able to have some last-ditch looks into the Retfilio chicane, into the Della Roggia, and even Ascari had a look at, but Gasly was just able to break the toe nicely. He was far enough ahead for it not to be sketchy, I think, with the way he was breaking the toe, and was able just to keep him behind and manage that win. I mean, it was a drive that you would expect to have been lights to flag pole victory, but it came from a driver who's never been in that position in Formula One before, as you said, Nigel. And I think, I don't think there's a single driver on that podium who you can really be unhappy with, apart from maybe Lance Stroll from his restart.
Yeah, I think considering the car Racing Point seemed to have with the pace Perez showed over the weekend, I think Stroll should be disappointed. He didn't make the most of it. That could be his one chance to win a race in F1. It could be Sainz's one chance as well. But I think Stroll will be a tad disappointed. Yes, it was a podium result, but you'd think the Racing Point at Monza would have been slightly better than the AlphaTauri and up there with the McLaren, and Stroll did have track position as well. So, yeah, a bit disappointed, I'd say, with Stroll considering the position he was in. But yeah, I thought Sainz drove equally as well as Gasly. I haven't really touched on Sainz, and yeah, to close in and get away from Norris when they were together at the restart, it was phenomenal. And Sainz was on it all weekend.
I don't know how much there is to be disappointed about from Stroll, like other
It's
than
a Grand Prix window, isn't it?
yeah, but like there's not like one moment like where you think, oh yeah, if he just done that right, like ultimately
The
I think he was
restart.
slower. Ultimately, he was slower though than the two in front
He was
of him.
only
Like,
he was only 2 and a bit seconds at the flag off Sainz. So if he that restart, he could have
nearly
controlled.
3.
Yeah, nearly 3. That's very small. That's fractional in terms
If that
of.
was Perez, I think Perez would have had a really good chance of winning. I feel. I can't help but feel.
I don't
Fair
know.
enough.
I just feel like with Stroll, there's not, other than being a faster all-round racing driver, there's not too much. I don't know.
Well,
I don't feel like if I was him, I'd just feel happy that
I
to
think
get the podium. And Sainz is clearly kind of beating
he
himself.
might never
up a
get this
bit from
chance
the
again,
radio.
Adam. I think that's how I
A lot
see
of
it,
drivers don't get the chance to get podium in the first place, though.
Yeah. Well, a lot don't get the chance to take the win, and if you miss out, then
yeah.
But
The
I think
points are both strong. The points are both strong. It's you've got a podium that's in Formula One. That's amazing. Enjoy it. And yeah, that's fair enough. But then it's you were in a net lead, knowing Hamilton was going to have to take a 10-second stop-go penalty. You're on the front row at the restart, at the standing restart, and you squandered that, and you're in third by the start of by the first corner on that lap. And that's then meaning that you could have controlled the race from there. The way that we've just praised Gasly and Sainz for being able to control their races fantastically through that, he's not done that. I mean, he was able to keep Norris at an arm's length once he got into a rhythm, but they were able to get into a rhythm straight away at that restart that unfortunately Stroll wasn't able to get into. And it's such a shame, because if he had done that, he'd have deserved the win as much as we're saying Gasly and Sainz, if he got it, would have done as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, he should enjoy the podium. It's a third place. It's the first podium for Racing Point this year. Fantastic. They should have probably got more related to the previous races, but we won't go into that. And that's great. And he was cracking a smile in the interviews. It's not like he was beating himself up massively. He's not sitting. I mean, he lost second on the line at Baku, so he knows heartbreak for a podium already in Formula One. Does Stroll? But yeah. It's still a what might have been for them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know. I think out of the 3 over the kind of sprint to the end, he was the slowest driver. And I feel like he would have still been if he led from the first lap. So that's kind of why, in my head, I don't think he should feel too disappointed, because I feel like it still would have been difficult to get the win. But you know,
yeah.
I accept the points that you're both making as well.
Yeah. Who do we think? Like, so out of Sainz and Gasly, were they both equal? Would you say, or was Gasly better than Sainz in the last part of the race, or Sainz and Gasly? Was it
Say
too hard to say?
Gasly. I'd say Gasly a bit better.
He was in a worse car, and he still was able to hold it off for 20 odd laps. And Sainz was able to close up, and we know it's hard to overtake. And we said, I mean, it is DRS trains all through Monza. The whole day it's been that. And we've seen that, and we know they're not able to turn up their engine modes anymore. But Sainz was able to close up but when Gasly needed to get that gap, he got that gap, and he kept it there. And he's in an AlphaTauri that, he's done bits in it. He's done really well this season, but Sainz qualified third in the grid, Gasly qualified 10th, and that was when we had the pure pace of those cars. And that he was able to keep him there. So,
Yeah, I think they were both outstanding, both lived up to the pressure as they have done in the past, and new position for both, as we've talked about. I'm happy Sainz kind of ignored his engineer. He kept telling him, to protect second place and not rush into stuff. I'm glad he had his racing driver instincts and pushed on. And Sainz himself couldn't have done much more. He didn't lock up. He didn't over push, which he could have easily done. Because when you go in for the first ever F1 win, it draws you into making a mistake. But he kept his head as well, and he was very close to the win. So it was an outstanding weekend from Sainz, and he's had some bad luck as well, hasn't he, with pit stops and stuff. But at Monza, he was really strong.
The season has ebbed and flowed for him. He's looked like he's on for a good result, and then something will snatch it from him. And he's had that for basically his whole career, has Carlos Sainz in Formula One. And the Ferrari car performance currently is a complete metaphor for that. Like, he gets announced as a Ferrari driver, and you're like, brilliant, that's a really good step for his career. Oh wait, Ferrari haven't built a very good car. And it's like, yes, oh no, yes, oh no. And this is like, yes, he's in the position for a win. Oh no, he's second. But yes, he's second. Oh, but it's second. It's like, everything's just like a reach for Sainz. But it's the mark of two fantastic drivers that they've thrust into the position of fighting for the win, and it's where they're happiest. It's where they're at home, and that's racing drivers.
Yeah.
I'd also just say the average age of the top four. I don't know what it is exactly, but you've got Gasly, Sainz, Stroll, Norris. They're all young, kind of early 20s. So
Sainz is the oldest by a mile at 26.
Yeah, so that's just if this is the next generation coming through to fight, then it will just be it's a great sign that there's so many young drivers around. And some of the best young drivers didn't even finish the race. So kind of to have this depth of talent coming through is a really good sign for the sport.
I think because Verstappen, Sainz, and Gasly in Brazil was the youngest podium in F1, I think. So Stroll is about a year younger than Verstappen. So this is the youngest podium in Formula One, something we didn't think would happen again, I think, frankly, personally.
Well, Gasly's now older, isn't he? And Stroll.
Oh, God, yeah, you're right. Yeah, they're older.
Stroll's 21, Norris is 20, Gasly's 24, and you just said Sainz is 26. That's about 22, 23 average age.
Oh, that's pretty similar then, actually. Of course, we can't talk about the Italian Grand Prix without talking about Ferrari. And it wasn't exactly the greatest weekend for Ferrari, I think you could safely say, with a double retirement and not reaching Q3 for the first time since 1984. That's 0 points in 2 races for Ferrari. I don't know when the last time that happened for them was. I think you're going to have to go quite a long way back in the statistics sack for that.
Sack.
Yeah, the statistics sack. I just made it up.
Well, just get it out now. Got it in the corner, so just give me a moment.
Oh, okay. Cheers.
Actually, I have got one. I've got one from the statistics stack, also known as the Observer. It was yesterday was the first time Ferrari, or it was
first time they weren't in the top 10.
It was
Monza.
Vettel's qualifying was the worst for a Ferrari at Monza since 1966.
66.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's only because the 1980 race was at Imola and like Ferrari were really bad in 1980, but luckily they didn't race at Monza that year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's credit to
Wow.
whoever wrote the Observer writer.
Yeah, it compounded for them this whole weekend. The qualifying wasn't great, we can safely say. We've already mentioned that. Leclerc 13th, Vettel 17th. And then the race, the race was even worse, really. Leclerc, at least in Spa, got a good start before he was overtaken. He didn't get a good start here. And Vettel then was dicing at the back with the Williams. And
As you do
if you're a Ferrari these days. And had brake failure, basically, and managed to quite skillfully coast it to directly into the box for Ferrari, which is something you wouldn't want to do with brake failure because you could wipe out your entire team when you can't stop. And he did a very good job at coasting it into.
Vettel was tempted.
We can go into the Ferrari-Vettel relationship more if you want to, but I think we've dissected that quite a lot.
But Leclerc was he wasn't bad after the safety car ended. Before he slammed it into the wall at Parabolica, I can't remember exactly. He might have been like 6th or something.
Yeah, he was one of the beneficiaries, wasn't he? I think.
Yeah, I know he benefited from that. So
he was in a decent position, but in the same way that like Latifi was in 7th, and that kind of thing. Like if he had stayed in the race in the way it transpired, probably could have got a point if there wasn't the following red flag. But unfortunately, there was said red flag for the big crash he had, which was a scary, scary crash. Red flag was the right decision by far. Yeah. He got on. He was coming through Parabolica. He did the dirty F and cars ahead, but it just looked. Either he got onto the marbles or he got onto a little bit of a grating at the side of the track, but he wasn't going as wide as the cars were going in qualifying for their flying laps. And the back just went and he caught it. And as he caught it, he was already on the gravel. So it was just straight into the barrier at Parabolica, the hoarding going up onto the halo, basically. Got up and walked away fantastically, but it was a terrifying, terrifying crash for Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, and it could have been a bad crash for Vettel as well with the brakes. So, thank goodness both drivers have come away from the weekend unscathed. But for Ferrari, though, that car, the low downforce package, looks like an absolute handful. I know Leclerc, I guess you can say it was a driver error. He was maybe a bit eager to make something on the restart, get on the throttle a bit early out of the last corner. But the Ferrari just looked horrible. And the rear wing they had, it was tiny. I don't think I've ever seen a rear wing that small ever, and just because of the straight line deficit, obviously. But,
that won't help DRS.
Yeah, I thought they would be a bit better this weekend, but no, they were right with Alpha and Haas yet again. So it was just a disastrous weekend, and they've got 2 more Italian races to come, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, they do. Maybe they can return to the form they were in Barcelona, that sort of 10th or 11th form at somewhere like Mugello or Imola. But I think if you're a Ferrari fan, you can only hope for that. Adam, do you have anything to say on the Maranello team?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, maybe it's just me being harsh, but I don't really have much sympathy for them being in this plight kind of after. I mean, for starters, I thought the Italian Grand Prix last year, Leclerc should have been given a penalty for some of his defence on Hamilton. and later, I think in this race, Albon got a penalty for kind of a similar defence, but also just the way
Albon's just brain fade.
That they, given that they cheated to get a more powerful engine, and now kind of it just feels like all of those chickens coming home to roost, really.
No, I completely agree with that, Adam, actually, thinking about it. I know, a lot of people say, it's just such a disaster and stuff like that, but, like you said, in a way, they're lucky that they got to keep their wins, they got to keep their constructors' points and money last year, and they're only having to pay for it now. But I think they've got away with it really, and hopefully for them they'll be with the 2022 reset they can get further up the grid after a couple of painful years. But yeah, I completely agree. I don't have too much sympathy really.
Yeah, it's unhealthy for the sport to have Ferrari doing badly. Obviously, they're the big name, they're the ticket that lots of people are drawn to. But yeah, we've waxed lyrical about their failings, really.
There's a lot of talk about, maybe we should talk about this in more depth for another podcast, but, Matteo Binotto, should he be sacked? Should there be some changes at Ferrari within team personnel? Is it Binotto's fault and stuff like that? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
It's a hard one, that, I think. There's no clear successor in the structure of the team there. That's why he's there. He's a technical director. That's from Richard Bennett's days, where it's kind of a secure position to lead, where it's like you've got a technical director and then you've got the heads in the technical side of it. There's not really like a deputy management leader, other than him being a sort of technical director, racing director, basically. That's Binotto's role. And I think what's interesting about it is that he's going to be a hard man to replace. It's a poison chalice for Ferrari. If you go in now, you're going to be expected to enact change. And I think, I don't know if the best thing for Ferrari now is just to weather the storm and just get through it. And rather than messing around with whoever's in charge, we know that Binotto's made a mistake, and presumably with all of his engine regulation and so on. But when Binotto was appointed, he was appointed because he had succeeded with all of that engine regulation trickery, if you will, and it was allowed for 2 seasons. It was only in the off season here that something was said about it. But I don't know, if it was something really, really bad, they would have been disqualified. And Ferrari, they had a resurgence in 18 and 19, and that's not forgotten for Binotto. And I think John Elkann, who had an article in the New York Times, he's the CEO, I think. He's not the chairman. Yeah. That's Louis Camilleri is the chairman. John Elkann has said, has come out very in a lot of support of Binotto. And I think if he should be sacked, which I think it's just, it's just messing around if he is sacked. Just let him get on with it.
Yeah, I agree.
If he is, Ferrari have got the backing of him for now. I mean, just let him oversee the 2022 regulation change. He's going to know that like the back of his hand because he's a technical director at heart, and he's going to know what he's doing with that. Don't bring someone else in to mess that up.
I don't know too much about the specifics of Ferrari and the specific personnel there in kind of who take over, but I think it might be dangerous saying, "Oh, let him do the 2022 reg," because, well, basically, is he the right person to take those regulations? Because if they don't, yes, you've got to weather this storm, but whoever's in charge will have a big bearing on where you come out of that storm on the other side. You look at McLaren and the people they've got, Zach Brown, who's kind of helped oversee this transition. So I don't know whether they would be better off bringing someone else in and maybe putting Binotto back to just focusing on the technical side of it. But I'm not sure where, I don't know if he is the right person to kind of take Ferrari out of this slump, but equally I don't know kind of who would come in and be able to do that.
I think Binotto gets a lot of criticism, and I think he gets too much because ultimately there was a power struggle, wasn't there, between Arriva and Binotto, and even Vettel. I think people say, "Oh, Vettel had a better relationship with Arriva," but I don't think he did really. I think if anything, he was in support of Binotto becoming team principal, which is what happens. That's something I don't really get, and I don't think Binotto should be at fault from a strange relationship with Vettel, because I think Vettel, like I said, was in support of Binotto becoming team principal. In terms of the car, so would it cheated in 2018 as well, or was it just
Well,
2019?
there are pictures from testing of when they had the screens up of like lots of smoke coming out, a bit like a new pope being elected, and they were doing controversial fuel burning in 2018 as well, to my knowledge.
So if it's 2018 as well, that can't really be put on Binotto either. That should be more Arriva Bene, shouldn't it?
That's put on his technical management, and that's, I think, how he won the power struggle to replace Arriva Bene was his technical knowledge made Ferrari a winning team.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I'm willing to give him a couple more seasons because I just think Ferrari have had to rush to build a car, knowing that with an engine that is, pretty bad. So I don't think the 2020 car is a true reflection of where Ferrari will be in the next few years, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Nigel. I think Binotto is popular in the team. He is popular in the team. He's popular with the drivers he's got going forward for next year. He's not popular with fans because they want a scapegoat. That's it. Yeah. It's the same we saw with Gasly last year. We've spoken a lot about him already. But with Gasly last year, everyone's like, get Gasly out, put Kvyat in, or put Albon in, mostly Kvyat because he got a podium in Hockenheim. And we're going to get the same this week on Albon. It's kill or be killed in Formula One. And so people are out to get Binotto because he's the one who sacked Vettel. So people think he's the guy to blame. And yeah, I mean, everyone in the team's going to have to take, the team's not doing well. And yes, the buck stops with him. But I think Binotto's the guy who got them out of the really poor form they took from the regulations in 2014. So James Allison, gave them a quick fix. Binotto gave them a long fix, and which was their 17, 18, 19 car. So I think Binotto's a good guy to have for the next regulations. And if he doesn't do it, they brought it back over these regulations. Just get someone else then in 2023 because he can bring it back then. But he's got this. They've got a chance to do it, and I think keep Ferrari as good a place as you can. Because it's get called a bit of a toxic area. Keep it as positive as you can. That's what Binotto's tried to do. He's tried to open it up with the media, which Arriva Bene was very famously just like, I don't want to talk to anyone. Binotto's been a lot more open. They got Netflix in and everything. So, yeah, Netflix with Ferrari this weekend. So that'll be one to watch. In Drive to Survive Series 3. But yeah, Binotto, I think, rather than creating another power struggle and another person who's got to come in and sort of seal the deal for Ferrari, I mean, yeah,
I think
let it be organically.
I think it is kind of being the head of Ferrari. It's a bit like being the head coach in Australian cricket, or the manager of the New Zealand rugby team or English football team. It's kind of that, feels like that high profile a job, and sometimes you get nice people in all of those jobs but just aren't kind of cut out for it. I hope Ferrari can get back to kind of legally fighting.
Do you?
Yeah.
I
hope someone can. And Ferrari are one of the most important teams in F1, whether you like them or not. But it's just, I don't know. I don't know how much faith I'd place in him to get back there. Really, sorry.
No,
that's fair enough. It's a valid opinion, Adam. Thank you.
Yes.
Another controversial figure in terms of Formula One role after this race, you could say, would be Valtteri Bottas. Poor start. Lots and lots of wheel spin, presumably, and bad reaction times from the replay. He was just slower off the start. By the end of lap 1, I think he was 6th, Valtteri Bottas, in the conquering Mercedes. And that's where he stayed, in 6th, until the pit stops. And then that was it. He finished in 5th even. Finished in 5th.
I mean, it's hard to say because he was complaining about the engine, wasn't he? And we don't know if he had a problem. Was it overheating? Perhaps, with the new engine modes, Mercedes had an overheated engine because they went too aggressive, perhaps. So perhaps that's not his fault. But as we saw with Hamilton coming through the field to only finish, 10 seconds behind, that is pretty poor. There's no excuses for that, I think. And the Mercedes is probably the second clear of everyone else. So to not overtake the cars ahead and not even get close really is a disastrous weekend for Bottas, and he's had a few rough weekends now. He started the season off well as he normally does, but he's in a bit of trouble. I think he's lucky that he's already re-signed for next year, to be honest.
Yeah, I think in many ways was it 70th anniversary where he took pole?
Yes.
Yeah, that kind of ended up feeling like a bit of a turning point in the race there, because it feels like now it kind of felt like he regained a bit of momentum then, obviously after winning the first race. But yeah, he just seems really down after the races now. He seems to just not kind of be enjoying his racing. The only thing I would say is kind of Lewis Hamilton is one of, if not the greatest F1 driver of all time, and Bottas isn't. And I kind of don't know how much kind of Lewis's drive today was one of those, points where it makes a difference, where kind of over one lap or whatever, kind of Bottas can be close to him, and he was, close in qualifying, but it's just kind of these moments that set, good drivers and legendary drivers apart. Yeah, and
we've always talked about it lots of times. Racecraft, he really is. It's his big weakness, isn't it?
It was like Hungary last year was another one where he kind of really struggled. And yeah, it's just coming back at him again. But having said that, kind of none of the traditional front runners were doing great. I mean, Verstappen was struggling to make up places too, and he's not someone you'd say has poor racecraft. So I don't know kind of how much there is to balance it versus just Hamilton's exceptional all-round ability in racecraft. It
is a bizarre one to look at. I mean, we expected Verstappen to probably not be able to quite be his normal self in terms of racing, because just the Red Bull around this track just isn't quite there. So we expected that. But then when Bottas got a poor start and then was nearly overtaken by Verstappen later in the first stages of the Grand Prix, then it was a bit of a shock to see that if you go from the form book. But then later on into the race, you could kind of sort of see that it was really hard to follow these cars. Bottas would get into within 6 or 7 tenths and then wouldn't be able to stay there at all. And he would lose the DRS, but then be able to try and mount another attack. But then it would just switch off his car working, it seemed. But with Lewis, when he was able to come through, he was able to, when he was overtaking a car like Ocon or a car like Perez, when he was old on his tyres, they were old on their tyres, they were in similar situations coming through the field late on, he was able to then just get there, bam, move done. Same with Kvyat, when he went round the outside at Curva Grande, he put himself into a position coming out of turn 2 on the chicane to go for it and to actually get himself into a position to try the move. Bottas was, I don't know whether he was not trying anything unorthodox for the racing and trying to be too linear, and that didn't help him, because the car had the pace to close up a lot of the time, but then when he couldn't give it that extra something to get close, which some drivers could do today.
Yeah, I mean, this Mercedes we've talked about as one of the best cars of all time because it's so good. So it is surprising that Bottas couldn't overtake. And yes, you can argue the Mercedes does have problems following and in traffic, but when you got a car that good, you should overtake at least 1 or 2 cars, you would think. And Hamilton was on the hard tyres, wasn't he? Which and Bottas was on medium, so he had, so he even had that advantage there, but he couldn't do it. And I'm just trying to think at Williams what Bottas's racecraft was like, and I can't really remember.
There were some stunners that I remember. Yeah. I remember Silverstone 2014, where he went from 14th and finished 2nd, And a lot of that was through just round the outside at Stowe, down the inside at Stowe. I mean, it's one corner, but he was able to do it there. There are a few races he did do well at, but a few he would definitely go for it with. But it's a hard one to compare if we're thinking about it from these cars' perspective.
Yeah, because the cars went wider in 2017, didn't they?
Yeah, they did by whatever it was, 20 centimetres.
Yeah.
And which is nearly a foot when you think about it. It's quite considerable. And they're longer now, they're heavier now. It's not an agile car to drive. It's a car that if you're going to go for an overtake, you need to commit and you need to, breathe in and just shut your eyes and do it and rely on your complete instinct to get it through. And I got the impression today with Bottas, I don't know what you guys will think about this, but look, he let it get to him that he wasn't getting past. And then he lost the confidence a bit with it and then wasn't going for it. I don't know if you could say that's a thing that's been eating at him in the back of his mind, you think, but he seems like he's really low. Like the last time he was this low was when Hamilton won 11 races or 10 races in 2018 and he didn't win any. And that was just like the lowest of the low for Bottas, but it feels like he's still there now. And
I agree. I mean, he's won as many races as Gasly has this season. That's fact. But yeah, it's difficult. I mean, just on what you were saying before, I'm kind of not sure. I don't know whether I'd say his racecraft is kind of better than average. If I was kind of ranking the drivers, I think he might be in a kind of 8 or something like that. I think, but yeah, he does seem low on confidence at the moment, and it's got to be so difficult when you're in that position against Hamilton, because he doesn't have many bad races at all. And even this, he didn't do anything wrong, really. It was his team. But in terms of, if you look at his performance through the race, then it was another good race. So there's not, kind of pretty much every other driver on the grid can think, he's going to have a bad race at some point, or, a few bad races, and I'll be able to get something from that, or I just need to be in the position to capitalise then. And Bottas just doesn't have that kind of to fall back on, which must be really, really tough.
He was just getting mugged at the start, though, wasn't he, by Norris around the outside at turn 3 and Stroll and Ricciardo. Not Stroll, Ricciardo was there as well. Verstappen, looked like he was going to overtake Bottas if
I don't know.
Problems. Yeah.
I don't know how much they kind of followed on from each other, though. Like, he was out of position from being overtaken by Norris, and then kind of just
all separate overtakes, I thought.
Well, so at the start, Sainz has got a better start. Norris made an attack at the start and was on the outside, I think, going into turn 1.
He wasn't even alongside, though. He was like
Norris was alongside.
Norris
was alongside going to turn 1, I'm pretty sure. Because they went wheel to wheel. Bottas got a better exit.
Turn 4, sorry.
Yeah. So at turn two, then Bottas got a better exit into Curva Grande. Norris was able to slipstream, which is a classic move that everyone can kind of do that. He slipstreamed, got alongside, but then basically went round the outside into the second chicane and then forced Bottas to then... He gave Bottas room on the exit, to be fair, but Bottas then, he was so focused on the exit there that he lost a bit of speed. Perez then came up the inside there, but wasn't able to get past. But Bottas then on his own went wide into Lesmo 2, which Perez then just drove past him. Ricciardo got a much better exit of Lesmo 2, came up behind him, slipstreamed him and took him down the straight coming up into Ascari chicane. So that's then Hamilton P1, Sainz P2, Norris P3, Perez P4, Ricciardo P5, Bottas P6, 2 of those from a mistake by him.
Yeah, mistakes.
3 from a mistake by him. Norris was just a good move. Sainz was an ordinary start for Sainz, bad start for Bottas. So, yeah.
I think it is just kind of maybe that instinctive, kind of last time at Spa, kind of the way he came off and kind of lifted following Hamilton, the way Verstappen did and Ricciardo did behind kind of was a lot smoother, and that's why they got such a good run going down, whereas Bottas's was just a bit clunky and kind of like there was just kind of a split second more thinking about it. So he lifted too late and then for too long compared to, you know, what would have been optimal and what the drivers behind him did. So I think sometimes it is, you know, it's obviously harsh for us to say, you know, never having driven a Formula Ford, but you know, it just feels like it's maybe that instinctive feel for it that is sometimes lacking there, which is kind of why, even though he kind of does have very fast one last pace and race pace, that he's just, you know, not able to go the extra step, I think.
Yeah, I think that's basically what we've all been saying. I think that's unfortunately how it goes. It seems to be. Nigel, do you want to talk about engine modes?
No, because I'm going to get really angry.
Adam,
no.
Shall we talk about engine modes?
yeah.
You, Nigel, and we can have a nice chat about it. No, no, Nigel. What do you want to say on that?
Floor is yours, my boy.
It's just so silly, isn't it? Why did they bring in these engine modes on a track which you can overtake at compared to the next tracks we got, Mugello, Sochi is going to be even harder to overtake. And now everyone's running in the same mode, the one mode. You can't turn it up to attack. You can't do anything to defend. So they're all just following each other. And it's just silly, really. They've made the racing even more boring, is the only word. Because it was already quite hard enough with the massive, ridiculous cars and the tyres that are more sensitive than something sensitive.
Sliced bread.
There we go. That's the one. But having these engine modes, which did not bring Mercedes back at all. In fact, they were 8/10 clear in qualifying, which is massive on a track which only has 11 corners. It's just silly. And I think even though today was a great race and a fantastic result for F1, do not be surprised if the rest of the season is pretty dull, because these engine modes are not helping us all.
I think if you look at after the red flag to the finish, the amount of overtakes, especially if you take out Hamilton, who was a much faster driver overtaking much slower cars, or for a lot of his overtakes, and Raikkonen, who was a much slower driver getting overtaken by much faster cars. Like, if you take out both of those, then I can't imagine there are many overtakes at all after the red flag restart, which kind of doesn't, especially at a track like Monza, where you should be getting more passes, it doesn't really bode well, you know, especially for going to Mugello next and possibly Imola, you know, tracks that people seem to think won't have as good overtakes and where there's less like parts of the track that you can overtake on. I think it is, you know, it is worrying. We'll have to wait and see how it turns out, but off evidence of this weekend, it doesn't look great.
Precisely, and it's not for lack of gap. In that you look at, I mean, DRS trains are a thing where a kind of like a car has DRS that can't overtake, and then everyone's got DRS behind, and that's that. So you can't get close because the car in front has got the boost that you want, basically. But there's no differentiation in how these cars have been deploying their power, which you look at a spec series, say, and these cars can go really well, but that's because in a spec series, they're not laced with downforce and drag and so on. They can run closer together, which means that when they get into the slipstream, they can pass. So we've got an amalgamation of so many problems that this one just has added to, rather than take away or stay the same. It's added to the problems we've already got, and it helps to show them, and it helps to show its own issues. And it's not like we can look at these engine mode rulings, even if they are to make it easier to police, which frankly is stupid. Don't put in technical regulations that you can't police. I don't want to say idiots, FIA, but yeah, and like, don't do that. So that's not going to go away. We're not going to have new engines until 2026, I think. So we're not going to have new regs coming out for that until 2022, 2023, perhaps. So this is here to stay for 6 years.
I hope not, because the only good aspect I can see in terms of racing is that it makes the overtakes more pure. Well, you're only going to see 3 overtakes anyway, 3 pure overtakes. So
pure overtake and just walk past somebody.
And the only other positive might be that Red Bull, ironically, have come out of it worse as we saw in qualifying. But I do think it's hard to tell because it was Monza. I think it's best to give it a few races, but if Red Bull have come out worse, then it will make the battle for third every race really interesting. That's the only positive. But in terms of racing, I wouldn't be surprised if we see even less overtaking than we normally get in F1. Incredible.
Yeah, that's our moan for the day. After we joined this podcast, screaming in delight, we've finished it with a an ordinary F1 fan moment, which is complaining about the F1 we absolutely loved today. And I think it's safe to say that the brilliant results that have been thrown up today have definitely saved Formula One for the most part. And we are very happy with the result today. Can we all agree?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Massively.
I think it's actually been a decent season. I don't know whether that's going too overboard. Kind of
debatable.
I don't know. If you ignore the fact that Hamilton's racing away, and even that's kind of impressive in its own right, then there is parts of it that you're like, you've had several unexpected podiums. Obviously, Gasly winning this, and I don't know. It's not been vintage or kind of the season that we probably want, but there have been kind of a lot of good moments, I think.
I think it's best to say at the end of the season how good the season has been.
Yeah.
Maybe in a couple of weeks we can do a mid-season review thing and discuss it then.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh man, that's going to be a lot of interesting conversation.
As usual.
As usual. Well said, Nigel. Yeah, we'll be back later in the week for the Tuscany Grand Prix Ferrari 1000 race at Mugello. I don't know the full title yet. One sec. I've got the F1 website here.
Tuscany Grand Prix is the name of the race.
Formula One Pirelli Gran Premio della Toscana Ferrari 1000 2020. Preview episode later in the week.
Can Gasly go back to back?
Yes.
Cool. That's Adam's prediction. Back to back, Gasly wins in Formula One. You heard it here first. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good day.